Welcome back to the Other Side of 45 podcast. I'm your host, Randy Black. This podcast is about taking chances, owning my mistakes, addressing generational and family cycles and trauma, completing my 50s by 50 list, and my life as a single mother of young adult children. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. This episode is entitled, as all of them in episodes in June will be entitled. June is for Pride, Juneteenth, Father's Day, and First Day of Summer. I've covered Pride and Father's Day, so today I will discuss Juneteenth. So let's begin by saying Happy Juneteenth! I am from a small city in South Carolina. I had never heard of Juneteenth until I relocated to Atlanta. So once I found out about Juneteenth, I researched the history and knew then that I needed to celebrate. This is what I discovered. On Freedom's Eve, or the eve of January 1st, 1863, the first watch night services took place. And on that night, enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and private homes all across the country, awaiting news that the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. At the stroke of midnight, all enslaved people in Confederate states were declared legally free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched onto plantations and across cities in the South, reading small copies of the Emancipation Proclamation, spreading the news of freedom in Confederate states. Only through the 13th Amendment did emancipation and slavery throughout the U.S. ended. But not everyone in Confederate territories would immediately be free. Even though the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, it could not be implemented in places still under Confederate control. As a result, in the westernmost Confederate state of Texas, enslaved people would not be freed until much later. Freedom finally came on June 19, 1865, when some 2,000 Union soldiers arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas. The Army announced that more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were free by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas. Despite all of this, the 13th Amendment was not yet ratified. On December 6, 1865, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution officially ended the institution of slavery and was ratified in the aftermath of the Civil War, which abolished slavery in the U.S. And it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the party has been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. With these words, the single greatest change wrought by the Civil War was officially noted in the Constitution. Don't you just love it? And I apologize that I stumbled over it a little bit because some other thoughts were coming into my head, and I really want to try to make sure that I captured the moment but so many thoughts were coming into my head. I hope I gave it the justice it deserved. So anyway, we're going to bring it forward to 2023. I spent the week leading up to today celebrating. And if you've been following me on my social media, you will see that I celebrated every day last week by wearing African-inspired dresses to work. But honey, that's not all I did. Of course, this past weekend, I attended the Juneteenth Atlanta Parade and Festival. Now, it's important that I discuss what the festival is. Now, you'll see and hear people talk about how much fun it is. It is a lot of fun. But it isn't just about the music and the fun. There are vendors. So when you are buying food or items, you're supporting a black-owned business. Then there was also a career fair that Saturday morning. I didn't go to that. I only got there in time to attend the incredibly long parade. But honey, y'all know I love parades. So there were also political groups. You would see people in the parade running for different office. The ACLU was there. I mean, just a host of organizations that advocate for our communities. Not only did I do that in celebration of Juneteenth, I also talked to my coworkers about the importance of Juneteenth. This includes those in the African diaspora. And you know what? I was shocked and a little disappointed by the number of young African Americans who had never heard of Juneteenth. So, and let me tell you why I was a little disappointed and shocked. Juneteenth was officially a national holiday on June 17, 2021. That's 2 years, y'all. The current sitting president, Biden, made it a national holiday June 17, 2021. So the young people that I'm talking about were old enough then to know that this happened. Now, I have a group that I have formed called Black Girls Who Network. And when we speak to the girls in the group, we stress the importance of staying updated on what's going on in the world, including politics. Now, we do warn them that you don't want to get in political debates when you're networking or in the workspace, but you do need to know the basis of present day politics. You need to know that. But I'm not going to address that in this episode because I want to keep the topic on Juneteenth. Anywho, so you know what else I did? I created a Juneteenth board at work in the break room that included the Emancipation Proclamation and letters from the freed people. The letters are heartwarming and heartbreaking. You might be able to see some of it on my social media, but if not, there's an actual website where you can search by name or state. I just searched by state, where you search by name or state, and it will show you the articles that appeared in the newspapers from newly freed people who were looking for their family after slavery ended. It's called Last Seen. So they would talk about the last time they saw their loved one. There's one where there's several, I won't say one, where parents were looking for their children were looking for their parents, siblings looking for each other. Just very heartwarming and heartbreaking letters of how they described them. And, this is what plantation you was on. And this, last I heard you were sold or I was sold. And it's just incredibly heartbreaking letters, because when you think about what that must have been like for them throughout the Confederate States, finding out that they were free, I always think, what were they thinking? And it's like, of course, they're going to look for their family. So then I also put up this letter by Jordan Anderson. I had heard about this letter, I want to say last year. Now you can search and read the letter in its entirety. You can search online by his name, Jordan Anderson. Or you can put in letter from a free man to his old master. But Mr. Anderson was responding to Colonel P.H. Anderson's letter requesting that he return to the plantation to help restore the farm after it was left destroyed in the war. So in the letter, Mr. Anderson asked for, when he writes to his old master, he asked for back pay for his wife and himself for the 30 years he worked for free. Y'all, the letter is just, they want to say is an attempt at satire, because he's like, if you meet these conditions and show me good faith, I will consider it. And as you read the letter, he talks about specific things like how he was shot at. It's just like, I was actually talking to my coworkers about how ridiculous it was that this man really thought that his slaves would return. What's interesting is a historian, that this letter has been authenticated, and he was tracing back the family of Colonel P.H. Anderson. And Colonel P.H. Anderson, because the slaves refused to come back, was unable to restore his farm and ended up selling it for pennies. Like, he sold it from way under what it was worth, because it was in such disarray. And when the historian tracked down the family descendants of Colonel P.H. Anderson. They said that they were still angry with Jordan Anderson and the other slaves for not returning. And you think about how ridiculous that sounds, and when this historian got this from them in 2006. You really upset about people not wanting to work for free? Like, it's the anyway. I digress. I really didn't mean to spend that much time on this, but it is an absolute ridiculous story. Anyway, so I asked my coworkers at one job about how they would feel if they saw those letters, and both agreed that they saw nothing wrong with it and they found it very interesting. But we also had in-depth conversations about Juneteenth and what it must have meant. But I did put that board up, and you can find that on my social media. So one of my coworkers asked, why was Juneteenth suddenly a thing? And when I explained that it wasn't really suddenly a thing, that there are some in the Black community who had always been celebrating it. In Texas, it's a huge thing, and they've been doing this for decades. But that it had, as I said, well, it has gained national attention since it was declared a national holiday in 2021. For me, this is also what Juneteenth is about. It's about educating not only our community, but those outside of the community. And it's a time of reflection. Because when I think of Juneteenth, I think about what it must have felt like to be told that that the life you've known is no longer in existence. And how would I react? Of course, I would be weary, because just because the law changed, that didn't mean that those practicing slavery would comply. And it also doesn't erase all the things that they had done to them. It's like, how do you face these people after they know they are no longer able to control your life? So when I read the last scene, Finding Family After Slavery, as I wanted to put myself in those shoes. And of course, I can't literally do that, but I can only imagine what that was like. Hey, you think, the last time I saw my mother, I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I wonder if she's still alive. It's just, those are kind of things that I like to think about. Wondering what happened to them after they were sold. So, in honor of my ancestors and all of those who were forced into slavery, I am unapologetically Black, because we are no longer bound by the chains of slavery physically. However, we do still have a connection to slavery genetically. It has been proven. And I will discuss some of those things on maybe other episodes. I don't know. It's kind of dark, so maybe not. My thing is, just because slavery ended, it didn't mean those formerly enslaved were free. There was a long road ahead of them. And there still is more to be done today in 2023. And I've said before on my platform that it is my desire to relocate my family outside of the United States. I believe that I am honoring my ancestors by choosing where I live, because they didn't have a choice. Now, I'm not saying I'll return to Mother Africa. I believe that Earth is home to everyone, and I'll decide which part of the Earth I call home when that time comes. Each year, my family and I try to celebrate in a big way, this year being the best thus far. So, the Juneteenth Festival downtown Atlanta, we attended that with friends. We keep inviting more and more people. We shared the history. And my children did too. We shared the history of Juneteenth with our coworkers and friends. So, happy Juneteenth! Visit my social media to see how my family and I celebrated for an entire week. And another way that I honor my ancestors is sharing on this platform what makes me proud. And I'm able to look at my life and know that I'm my ancestors' dream come true. And like the theme song for my life, Just Fine by Sister Mary J., in connection to Juneteenth and how I celebrate, I like what I see when I'm looking at me, when I'm walking past the mirror. Don't stress through the night. At a time in my life, ain't worried about if you feel it. Got my head on straight. I got my vibe right. Ain't gonna let you kill it. You see, I wouldn't change my life. My life's just fine. Meet me on the other side of 45's podcast, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. New episodes will be released every Monday. Thank you for tuning in. Please rate the podcast 5 stars so others can find it. It helps me grow my podcast. Your feedback and support is greatly appreciated. If you would like to share your story, please email me at host, that's HOST, host, at theothersideof45.com.